The salty breeze ruffled Elena's dark hair as she walked along the shoreline, picking up colorful shells that caught her eye. At 23, she still found joy in these small treasures, just as she had when her father first brought her to this beach as a little girl. The early morning sun painted golden streaks across the water, and the familiar sound of fishing boats heading out to sea reminded her of home. "Elena, your mother needs those groceries before noon," called out her father from their modest blue house perched on the hill overlooking the bay. Paulo Rivera had been fishing these waters for 30 years, his skin weathered by the sun and salt, his hands strong from pulling nets. "Coming, Papa." Elena tucked the shells into her pocket and jogged up the sandy path. Their home wasn't fancy, just a simple 2-bedroom house with faded curtains and mismatched furniture, but it was filled with love and laughter. Inside, Elena's mother, Rosa, was hunched over her sewing machine, fingers moving with practiced precision as she hemmed a wedding dress for the mayor's daughter. "Mama, I'm heading to the market now. Do you need anything else besides what's on the list?" Rosa looked up, pushing her reading glasses higher on her nose. "Maybe some of those sweet oranges if old Mr. Perez has them, but only if they're not too expensive." She reached for her worn leather wallet. "Here, take an extra 10. Elena shook her head. "Keep it, Mama. I got paid yesterday for tutoring the Thompson kids." Pride flickered across Rosa's face, though she tried to hide it. My smart girl, always thinking ahead. The local market buzzed with activity as Elena weaved between stalls, greeting neighbors and shopkeepers who had known her since birth. This small coastal town of Puerto Azul might seem insignificant to outsiders, but to Elena, it was the entire world. Or at least it had been, until that letter arrived 3 months ago. "Elena Rivera, is that really you?" Mrs. Delgado, her high school literature teacher, rushed over with open arms. "I just heard the news from Principal Moreno, a full scholarship to Westridge University, the first student from our town in 15 years. Elena blushed as several shoppers turned to look. "It's not official yet, Mrs. Delgado." "Nonsense. The letter came to the school yesterday. They're announcing it at next week's town meeting." The older woman squeezed Elena's hands. "Your essay about sustainable fishing practices and how coastal communities can adapt to climate change. Brilliant work. I always said you were meant for bigger things." Walking home with her basket full of groceries, Elena felt a mix of excitement and fear swirling in her stomach. Westridge University was in the big city, almost 4 hours away by bus. She had applied on a whim, never truly believing they would accept a fisherman's daughter from a town barely visible on maps. That evening, as the family sat around their small dinner table, Elena finally gathered the courage to bring up the scholarship. "Papa, Mama, I got accepted to Westridge University with a full scholarship." Her father's fork clattered against his plate. "Westridge, the fancy school in the city?" Elena nodded, watching her parents' faces carefully. "I wouldn't have to pay for tuition or housing, just books and some living expenses, which I can cover with part-time work." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "So far away?" "I know, Mama, but it's a chance to study environmental science, to learn how to protect our oceans, maybe even come back and help our town someday." Paulo was quiet for a long moment, staring at his weathered hands. "Your grandfather, my father, couldn't read or write his own name. My Elena going to university." His voice cracked slightly. "What kind of father would I be if I held you back from such a blessing?" 4 months later, Elena stood in front of her dormitory building, clutching a second-hand suitcase filled with carefully mended clothes and a few precious books. The campus sprawled before her. Ancient buildings with ivy-covered walls standing alongside sleek modern structures with glass facades. Students streamed past in expensive clothes, many absorbed in their phones or chatting in groups that radiated confidence and belonging. Elena swallowed hard. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. The first weeks passed in a blur of overwhelming classes, confusing campus maps, and late nights studying in the library because her roommate Olivia hosted loud gatherings in their shared space. Elena felt the constant weight of being different. Her accent, her simple clothes, her complete lack of knowledge about the bands, shows, and celebrities her classmates discussed. But in her environmental science classes, none of that mattered. There, Elena's practical knowledge of ocean currents, fish migrations, and weather patterns earned her professors' respect. Dr. Harlow even asked her to stay after class one day. "Ms. Rivera, your analysis of the coastal erosion case study was exceptional. You brought perspectives that students who've only studied these issues in textbooks couldn't possibly understand." Elena's face warmed with the praise. "Thank you, Professor. I just described what I've seen happening in my hometown. And that real-world experience is invaluable, which is why I'd like you to consider volunteering at our upcoming charity fundraiser for ocean conservation. Several industry leaders and potential donors will attend, and having someone who can speak authentically about these issues would be tremendously helpful." That Saturday, Elena stood nervously in the grand ballroom of the Westwood Hotel, wearing a simple blue dress that her mother had made and shipped to her for the occasion. Students in formal wear circulated with trays of champagne and appetizers, while Elena was stationed beside a display about plastic pollution in coastal communities. "Excuse me, but is that the Gulf of Monterey in these photographs?" A deep voice broke through her thoughts. Elena turned to find herself looking up at a tall young man with thoughtful gray eyes and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. His tailored suit probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, but his expression held genuine interest rather than the polite boredom she'd seen on other attendees' faces. "Yes, it is. The plastic accumulation in these coves has increased by 60% in just 5 years. She pointed to a particularly striking image. This beach used to be a nesting ground for sea turtles, but now the microplastics are changing the sand temperature, affecting the gender ratio of hatchlings," he finished. "Sorry, I've read some research on the topic. I'm Alexander. By the way, Alexander Blackwood." Elena shook his offered hand. "Elena Rivera. Are you an environmental science major too?" A small smile played at his lips. "Business and technology, actually. But environmental issues interest me, especially innovative solutions for cleanup and prevention." They talked for nearly an hour, other guests forgotten as Elena described the real-world impacts she'd witnessed in her hometown, and Alexander shared ideas about biodegradable packaging his father's company was developing. Unlike others she'd met at university, he listened more than he spoke, asking thoughtful questions that showed he valued her knowledge. "You should come to the Engineering Sustainability Summit next weekend," he suggested. "My team is presenting a prototype for ocean plastic collection that could work for smaller fishing communities without requiring major infrastructure." Elena hesitated. "I'm not sure I'd fit in at something like that." "Because you're not an engineering student?" Alexander asked. "That's actually perfect. We need feedback from people who understand coastal communities and their practical needs." "It's not that. It's just—" Elena gestured vaguely at her simple dress and then at his expensive suit. Understanding dawned in Alexander's eyes. "I see. Well, if it helps, I'll be wearing jeans and a hoodie to the summit. It's a working session, not a formal event." He pulled out his phone. "Give me your number and I'll text you the details. No pressure, but I think your perspective would be valuable." Against her better judgment, Elena found herself sharing her contact information. Later that night, as she lay in bed listening to Olivia's gentle snoring from across the room, her phone lit up with a message. It was refreshing to talk with someone who cares about real impact rather than just theory or optics. "Hope to see you at the summit. Alexander." Elena smiled in the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her place at Westridge after all. Little did she know that this chance meeting would change not just her university experience, but the entire course of her life, leading her into a world of wealth and privilege she could never have imagined, with joys and heartbreaks beyond anything in her small-town dreams. 3 years later, Elena stood in front of a floor-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself in the simple white dress that somehow looked more elegant than anything she'd ever worn. Her mother fussed with the handmade veil, tears glistening in her eyes. "You look like an angel," Rosa whispered, tucking a stray curl behind Elena's ear. "Are you sure about this, my daughter? Everything is happening so fast." Elena's heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and nerves. "I love him, Mama. Alexander is nothing like what we thought rich people would be. His world is very different from ours, her father said from the doorway, looking uncomfortable in his new suit. These past 2 years, he's always come to visit us here, but now you'll be living in his world. Elena turned to face him. Papa, Alexander values the same things we do. Honesty, hard work, kindness. That's why I fell in love with him. Paolo nodded slowly. I believe you, and I've seen how he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. He cleared his throat. Just remember who you are, Elena Rivera. No matter what fancy house you live in or important people you meet. The small church in Puerto Azul was packed with townspeople curious to see the local girl, who had captured the heart of Alexander Blackwood, whose family name appeared regularly in business magazines, and whose face had been featured in last month's 30 Under 30 list. Alexander had insisted on having the wedding in Elena's hometown, wanting to honor her roots before bringing her into his world. Only a handful of people had come from Alexander's side: his college roommate Thomas, who served as best man, a couple of business partners, and his personal assistant Greta. Noticeably absent were any family members, something Alexander had explained with a tight smile. They're busy with the company merger. We'll have a reception in the city next month so you can meet everyone. As Elena walked down the aisle onto her father's arm, she saw only Alexander waiting for her, his gray eyes filled with such love that all her doubts melted away. This man had spent the past 2 years showing her that the differences in their backgrounds didn't matter, that he valued her mind and heart above all else. You are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen, he whispered as she reached him. 1 month after returning from their honeymoon, a magical trip to Costa Rica where they'd spent half their time exploring rainforests and helping at a sea turtle conservation project, Elena found herself stepping out of a sleek black car in front of the Blackwood family mansion. The enormous stone house with its manicured gardens and fountain looked like something from a movie set. Ready to meet the family? Alexander squeezed her hand reassuringly. Don't worry. They'll love you. Elena smoothed down her dress, a designer piece Alexander had insisted on buying her for the occasion, though it felt stiff and formal compared to her usual clothes. What if I use the wrong fork or something, she asked, only half joking. Alexander laughed. Then I'll use the wrong fork too, and we can be hopeless together. He kissed her forehead. Just be yourself. That's who I married. The massive front. Decor swung open to reveal a stern-faced woman in her 60s, her silver blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Victoria Blackwood's sharp eyes assessed Elena from head to toe, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. So this is the girl who swept my son off his feet. Her voice was cool and precise. Welcome to the family home, Elena. Behind Victoria stood a younger woman with the same gray eyes as Alexander, though hers held none of his warmth. Isabel, Alexander said, embracing his sister briefly. How was Milan? Productive. Isabel air-kissed Elena's cheeks. Your dress is charming. Is that this season's collection? Before Elena could answer, a tall man with silver-streaked, dark hair appeared, his presence commanding the room instantly. Robert Blackwood, Alexander's father, had the same strong jawline as his son but carried himself with an authority that came from decades at the helm of a business empire. There's my boy. Robert clapped Alexander on the shoulder before turning to Elena. And the mysterious bride we've heard so little about. A pleasure to meet you at last, my dear. The reception that followed was a blur of faces and names, business associates, family friends, socialites whose names Elena recognized from magazines. She tried to remember Alexander's coaching. Small talk, confident handshakes, never reveal when you don't know what they're talking about. Alexander tells us you studied environmental science, said a woman whose diamond necklace probably cost more than Elena's entire education. How interesting. Do you plan to work now, or will you be focusing on charity work like most of the wives? Elena began, but was cut off by a stunning redhead who appeared at her elbow. Cassandra Morgan, the woman introduced herself with a dazzling smile. Alex and I practically grew up together. Our families have been friends for generations. Nice to meet you, Elena said, noticing how Cassandra's hand lingered on Alexander's arm as she greeted him with familiar ease. Alex didn't mention how young you are, Cassandra said, her smile never faltering. What a whirlwind romance it must have been. We were all so surprised when he announced he was married. As the evening wore on, Elena felt increasingly out of place. Conversations around her centered on people she didn't know, events she hadn't attended, and references she didn't understand. Alexander kept being pulled away by his father to meet important contacts, leaving Elena to navigate the sharks alone. More champagne? Isabel appeared beside her, refilling Elena's glass. You look like you need it. Thank you, Elena said gratefully. Everyone's been very welcoming. Isabel laughed softly. Oh, honey, these people aren't welcoming, they're curious. The son of Robert Blackwood marrying a nobody from some fishing village? It's the gossip of the season. Elena felt her cheeks burn. I'm not a nobody. Of course not, Isabel said smoothly. You're now a Blackwood. But take some advice from someone who knows this world. The novelty will wear off for Alexander. Men like my brother always return to what they know. She nodded toward where Alexander stood laughing with Cassandra and some other beautiful people who clearly shared a lifetime of inside jokes. The weeks that followed were a crash course in the rules of high society. Victoria insisted on helping Elena adjust, which meant constant criticism thinly veiled as advice. Darling, we don't wear prints to the opera, she would say, or, that necklace is lovely for casual events, but perhaps something more substantial for the charity gala. Alexander was supportive when he was around, but his work kept him increasingly busy. Just temporary, he assured Elena. Once this merger is complete, we'll take a long weekend somewhere, just the two of us. The worst moments came during social gatherings, where Elena frequently found herself isolated while the others reminisced about shared memories or discussed mutual acquaintances. Did you see the Richardson wedding? One woman asked during a ladies' lunch. When Elena shook her head, the woman exchanged knowing glances with Cassandra. Oh, that's right. You weren't part of our circle then. After one particularly brutal dinner party where Elena had been seated far from Alexander, and next to an elderly man who spoke only of his stock portfolio, she found herself crying in the bathroom. Trouble in paradise? Cassandra's voice startled her as she entered without knocking. Oh, don't look so surprised. Everyone can see you're struggling to fit in. Elena wiped her eyes quickly. I'm fine, just a headache. Listen, I've known the Blackwoods all my life. Victoria will never accept you. She had plans for Alexander, plans that involved someone. Well, someone more like me, to be blunt. Cassandra checked her perfect makeup in the mirror. Alexander was always a rebel, always needed to prove he's different from his father. You're his little rebellion, Elena. Sweet, but temporary. You don't know anything about our relationship, Elena said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Cassandra's smile was almost pitying. Maybe not, but I know Victoria has already spoken to the family lawyers about protecting the Blackwood assets, just in case this marriage is as short as we all expect it to be. The final blow came the night of the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala. Elena had spent weeks preparing, determined to make Alexander proud. She wore a gown he had bought her, practiced small talk, memorized names and connections of key guests, but as she walked toward the library to find Alexander before the event, she heard voices from behind the door left slightly ajar. The girl is completely out of her depth, Victoria's crisp voice said. She embarrasses the family name every time she opens her mouth about those ridiculous environmental projects. She'll be gone within the year, came Cassandra's confident reply. I've already planted seeds about her possible infidelity with that handsome gardener. Once I show Alexander the doctored photos. Just be discreet, Victoria cautioned. The prenup is solid, but scandal would still hurt the company's image. We need her gone quietly, with Alexander believing it was his idea to end things. Elena backed away from the door, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. The beautiful world Alexander had promised her had been a mirage. In reality, she was just an intruder they were plotting to remove, like an unsightly weed in their perfect garden. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky and rain lashed against the windows, Elena made the most painful decision of her life. Elena moved through the bedroom like a ghost, pulling only her most personal belongings from the massive walk-in closet. She left behind all the designer clothes, the jewelry Alexander had given her, the expensive perfumes she'd never quite gotten used to. In the end, everything fit into the same worn suitcase she'd brought to university 5 years ago. Rain pounded against the windows as she sat at the antique writing desk, tears falling onto the cream-colored stationery as she tried to find the right words. My dearest Alexander, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I can't fight anymore, not against your mother, not against Cassandra, not against a world that was never meant to include someone like me. I heard them tonight. They're planning to trick you with fake photos to make you believe I've been unfaithful. I would never betray you that way, but I realize now that I've been fooling myself. The people closest to you will never accept me, and eventually their constant whispers would poison what we have. I won't stand between you and your family. You were raised to carry on the Blackwood legacy, and I'm just the distraction who almost derailed that destiny. Please don't try to find me. A clean break will be easier for both of us. I will always treasure the love we shared. Elena, she folded the letter carefully, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it on Alexander's pillow. For a moment, she stood looking at the photograph on his nightstand. The two of them laughing on a beach in Costa Rica, so young, so in love, so naively certain they could overcome any obstacle. Elena wiped her eyes and picked up her suitcase. Rather than calling for a driver, she slipped out through a side door. The rain soaked her immediately, but she barely noticed as she walked down the long driveway, past the security gate where the night guard was dozing, and out onto the street, beyond the exclusive neighborhood. Only when she was sitting in a taxi did she realize she had nowhere to go. Not back to Puerto Azul. Her parents would insist she tell Alexander the truth, fight for her marriage. Not to any friends from university. They were all part of a life she was now leaving behind. Miss? Where to? The driver asked again, more gently this time, clearly noticing her distress. Elena thought of the one place in the city that had always brought her comfort. Bayview Books, please, on Harbor Street. The small bookstore with its apartment upstairs had been Elena's refuge during university. The owner, an elderly woman named Beatrice, had hired Elena part-time during her freshman year, and they'd stayed in touch even after graduation. It was nearly midnight when the taxi pulled up, but a light still glowed in the apartment window. Soaking wet and shivering, Elena knocked on the side door. Moments later, Beatrice appeared in a faded bathrobe, her eyes widening at the sight of Elena standing there with a suitcase. Child, what on earth? She pulled Elena inside. You're drenched. Come upstairs right away. 20 minutes later, wrapped in a borrowed robe with a mug of hot tea warming her hands, Elena poured out the whole story through fresh tears. Beatrice listened without interruption, her kind face growing increasingly concerned. The spare room is yours for as long as you need it, she said firmly when Elena had finished. And if you want work, the store always needs help. I can't impose nonsense. You're family to me. Beatrice patted her hand. Get some sleep. Things always look different in the morning. But when morning came, Elena felt just as broken. The weight of her decision pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Had she overreacted? Should she have confronted Alexander with what she'd heard, given him a chance to stand up to his family? No. The look in Victoria's eyes when she spoke about Elena had been cold, calculating, the look of someone who always got her way. And Cassandra's confidence about the fake photos suggested this wasn't their first scheme. How could she fight people who had wealth, connections, and a lifetime of manipulating others to get what they wanted? Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander's private jet touched down after an overnight flight from Singapore. He checked his phone as soon as they landed, surprised to find no messages from Elena. Usually, she sent a quick text when she knew he was flying home, something sweet and simple that always made him smile. The merger negotiations had been exhausting but successful. He'd spent 16 hours a day in meetings for the past week, expanding Blackwood Tech's reach across Asian markets. His father would be pleased. Though Alexander had done it his own way, focusing on sustainable technologies and fair labor practices rather than just profit margins. But none of that mattered now. He was finally home, and all he wanted was to see Elena, to apologize for being so absent lately, and to see her beautiful smile light up her eyes. "Home, sir?" his driver asked as Alexander slid into the back seat of the waiting car. "Yes, and step on it, I've missed my wife." The house was oddly quiet when he arrived. Usually Elena was in the garden at this hour or in the sunroom reading. He checked both places before heading upstairs, loosening his tie as he went. "Elena?" he called, pushing open their bedroom door. The envelope on his pillow caught his eye immediately. Something cold settled in his stomach as he tore it open, his hands shaking slightly as he read Elena's words. No, this couldn't be happening. Not Elena, his rock, his heart, the one person in his life who loved him for himself and not for his name or his money. Alexander sank onto the edge of the bed, reading the letter again. What fake photos? What was she talking about? And how could she believe even for a moment that he would choose his family over her? Mr. Blackwood? A soft knock at the door was followed by the appearance of Maria, their housekeeper. "I didn't know you were home, sir." Alexander looked up, his face ashen. "Maria, when did my wife leave? Did you see her go?" Maria twisted her hands nervously. "Last night, sir, during the storm, I saw her walking out with just one suitcase. In the rain. I offered to call a driver, but she refused. Why didn't you call me immediately?" His voice rose sharply. "I tried, sir, but you were in flight." Maria hesitated. "Sir, there's something you should know. Yesterday, before the gala, I was cleaning near the library when I overheard your mother and Miss Morgan talking." Alexander stood. "What did you hear exactly?" "They were saying terrible things about Mrs. Blackwood. Miss Morgan mentioned something about fake pictures with the gardener, and how they would make sure Mrs. Blackwood left. Your mother was giving instructions saying it needed to look like Mrs. Blackwood's choice to go." Alexander's face darkened with each word. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Maria?" "Yes, sir. I've worked for your family for 27 years. I wouldn't lie about such a thing." She straightened her shoulders. "The way they've treated your wife, it isn't right. Mrs. Blackwood has been nothing but kind to all of us." Alexander paced the room, fury building inside him. So this was why Elena had fled. She'd overheard their vicious plotting and believed he wouldn't stand by her against them. The thought made him sick. Had he really been so blind to what was happening in his own home? So absorbed in work that he'd failed to protect the woman he loved? "Find out everything you can about where she might have gone," he ordered, already pulling out his phone. "Friends, places she mentioned, anywhere she might seek shelter. And Maria, not a word of this to my mother or sister. As far as they're concerned, I'm still in Singapore." While his driver searched the obvious places, Elena's old university, the environmental nonprofit where she'd volunteered, Alexander contacted the detective agency he sometimes used for corporate background checks. Within hours, they had teams discreetly watching bus stations, checking hotels, and reviewing security camera footage from around the city. Days passed with no sign of Elena. Alexander barely slept, his mind tortured by images of her alone and hurting, believing he had somehow chosen his toxic family over her. He'd been raised in wealth and privilege, taught that the Blackwood name opened every door, yet now, when it mattered most, he felt utterly powerless. On the third day, when his mother called asking why he hadn't returned her messages about an important charity board meeting, Alexander finally snapped. "I know what you did," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I know about the plot with Cassandra, the fake photos, driving Elena away." Victoria's momentary silence confirmed everything. "Alexander, darling, I don't know what you're talking about. Has something happened with Elena?" "Stop lying, Mother, she overheard you. She's gone. Thinking I'd believe your lies over her." "Well, perhaps it's for the best," Victoria said, dropping the pretense. "She never belonged in our world, Alexander. You must have seen that yourself. The way she embarrassed you at the Winthrop dinner, talking about fishing villages and climate change. The only person who embarrassed me was you. Alexander cut in. With your cruelty and your shallow values. Elena is worth 10 of you, and when I find her, and I will find her, you'll understand exactly what you've lost. He ended the call and stood at the window, looking out at the manicured gardens that suddenly seemed as artificial as the world he'd been raised in. The truth hit him with crushing force. He had brought Elena into this viper's nest and then left her unprotected while he chased business deals on the other side of the world. But he would make it right. No matter what it took, he would find her and prove that their love was stronger than all the wealth and power the Blackwood name commanded. What Alexander didn't know was that Elena was just 3 miles away, helping Beatrice arrange new books, on the shelves of the small store, trying desperately to build a new life from the ashes of her broken heart. 2 weeks turned into a month, and Elena gradually settled into a quiet routine at Bayview Books. Each morning, she rose early to help. Beatrice opened the shop, carefully arranging new arrivals and helping customers find the perfect read. In the afternoon, she often walked to the nearby children's hospital where she'd begun volunteering, reading stories to kids who needed a distraction from their treatments. She had changed her appearance slightly, cutting her long dark hair into a chin-length bob and wearing simple glasses instead of her contacts. Not exactly a disguise, but enough of a change that casual acquaintances might not recognize her at first glance. She'd also reverted to using her maiden name, becoming Elena Rivera once again. "You've brought new life to this old place," Beatrice told her one evening as they closed up the shop together. "Customer numbers are up 30% since you started that children's story hour and the environmental book club." Elena smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm glad to be useful. That's not what I meant, dear." Beatrice's kind face grew serious. "You have gifts. Your mind, your compassion, your ability to connect with people. Are you really going to hide them away in my little bookshop forever?" Elena busied herself straightening a stack of bestsellers. "I'm not hiding. Aren't you? It's been over a month and you still jump every time the door opens thinking it might be him. You've checked your joint bank accounts exactly 0 times, even though you must be running out of savings soon." "I don't want his money," Elena said firmly. "Noble, but foolish." Beatrice shook her head. "At least call your parents. They must be worried sick." Elena's shoulders slumped. "I emailed them last week, told them Alexander and I were taking some time apart, that I needed space. They think I'm staying with university friends." She couldn't bear for her father to know how thoroughly she had failed in the glittering world that had seemed so full of promise. Across the city, in the penthouse office of Blackwood Tower, Alexander sat surrounded by stacks of documents, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and several days' worth of stubble covered his jaw. On the glass wall behind him, dozens of sticky notes created a complex web of names, companies, and financial figures. "Sir, the board members are getting restless." Thomas Chen, Alexander's closest friend since college and now his head of legal affairs, set down another folder on the cluttered desk. "This morning, 3 of them called to ask if the rumors about you stepping down are true." Alexander barely looked up from his laptop. "Let them wonder. Your father has called 6 times. Today alone. Eventually you'll have to talk to him." "No, I don't." Alexander's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. "What I have to do is find my wife and dismantle the cage my family built around both of us. Everything else is secondary." Thomas sighed, dropping into the chair opposite. "The private investigators have found nothing. It's like she vanished. She doesn't want to be found." Alexander rubbed his tired eyes. "Which means I need to create a situation where she'll come to me, or at least let me know she's safe." "And your plan to destroy your family's social standing in the meantime, how's that going?" A cold smile crossed Alexander's face. "Right on schedule. Phase 1 is already complete. I've transferred controlling interest in my personal tech holdings to separate companies. As of yesterday, I own 40% of Blackwood Tech through shell corporations that not even my father knows about. And Victoria's social clubs? I now own the buildings that house her 3 favorite charity organizations, the boards of directors. For both the Opera Society and the Heritage Foundation have quietly welcomed their newest and largest donor." Alexander's smile grew sharper. Next week, they'll announce significant changes to their leadership structures. Thomas whistled, low. You're really scorching the earth here, Alex. They drove away the only person who ever loved me for myself, not for what I could give them. Alexander's voice cracked slightly. My mother, my sister, Cassandra, they've spent their lives using the Blackwood name to crush anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of worthiness. It ends now. And Isabel's husband? The tax evasion evidence has been anonymously delivered to 3 different regulatory agencies. By my calculation, the indictments should come down next Tuesday. Thomas looked at his friend with concern. When was the last time you slept? Or ate something that wasn't from a vending machine? Alexander waved the question away. I'll rest when Elena is back, or at least when I know she's safe and has what she needs. He pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. The trust fund is set up, $5 million, completely untraceable to me. If she won't come back, at least she'll never have to worry about money again. Assuming you can find her to tell her about it. Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it, then sat up straighter. The hospital charity event. My investigators just confirmed Elena has been volunteering at Bayview Children's Hospital. She's here? In the city? Thomas looked shocked. All this time she's been right under our noses? Not just in the city. Alexander was already pulling up maps on his screen. The hospital is 3 blocks from her old university. Near that bookstore she always talked about. His voice caught as realization dawned. Beatrice, the old woman who gave her her first job. I'll call the car, Thomas said, already reaching for his phone. Alexander held up his hand. No. If I show up there now, she'll just run again. His mind raced through possibilities. The Children's Hospital fundraiser is next week. Elena would never miss a chance to help those kids, even if she's trying to stay hidden. He began typing. Rapidly. I need to make sure I'm not on the guest list. As far as anyone knows, I'm still out of the country on business. What are you planning? A chance meeting. Somewhere public enough that she won't feel trapped, but private enough that we can really talk. Alexander looked more alive than he had in weeks. And I need to accelerate the rest of my plan. It's time for the final phase. Meanwhile, Elena was sorting through a donation of children's books when the hospital's fundraising coordinator stopped by the reading room. Elena, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Is something wrong, Diane? Wrong? No. Actually, something amazing has happened. The older woman was practically bouncing with excitement. You know the annual fundraiser is next week and we were still about $50,000 short of our goal for the new pediatric wing. Elena nodded, setting aside a colorful picture book. Well, an anonymous donor just pledged $500,000. Not only that, but they're matching all other donations made during the event dollar for dollar. We could raise over $1 million in one night. That's wonderful, Elena said, genuinely happy for the hospital. Those children deserve the best care possible. The donor had just one condition. Diane handed Elena an envelope. They requested that you be the one to speak about the children's reading program during the event. They apparently heard about the difference you've been making with the long-term patients. Elena stared at the envelope, a strange feeling washing over her. Me? But I've only been volunteering for a few weeks. Surely Dr. Patterson or one of the full-time staff would be better. The donor was very specific. Just 5 minutes about the reading program, that's all. Diane squeezed her shoulder. This could be life-changing for so many kids, Elena. After Diane left, Elena sat quietly, turning the envelope over in her hands. Could this be connected to Alexander? Had he found her? Part of her wanted to run, to pack her few belongings and disappear again. But the thought of the children stopped her. Many of them faced years of treatments, and the new wing would bring state-of-the-art equipment and more comfortable rooms for their families. How could she put her personal problems above their needs? That evening, as she helped Beatrice close the bookshop, Elena made her decision. I'm going to speak at the hospital fundraiser, she announced, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Beatrice looked up from the register. Even if it might be a way for Alexander to find you? Even then. Elena squared her shoulders. I'm tired of hiding, Beatrice. If Alexander is behind this donation, then maybe it's time we talked face to face, and if he's not, well, those kids deserve someone who will speak up for them. Beatrice smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. There's the Elena I remember. Welcome back, my dear. Across the city in a sleek downtown restaurant, Alexander sat across from his father for the first time in weeks. Robert Blackwood looked older somehow, the strain of recent events etched in new lines around his eyes. I don't understand what you're doing, son. Robert's voice was low, controlled. This vendetta against your own family. It's not a vendetta, it's justice. Alexander cut a piece of steak with surgical precision. Mother and Isabel drove away the only person who has ever truly cared about me. They manipulated, schemed, and bullied until Elena believed she had no choice but to leave. Your mother can be difficult, but she wants what's best for you for the family name. Alexander laughed, a hollow sound. The family name. That's all that's ever mattered, isn't it? Not happiness, not love, just the almighty Blackwood reputation. Robert set down his fork. Alexander, you've frozen your mother's charitable foundation accounts. You've somehow gained control of her social clubs. Isabel's husband is facing criminal charges. You've turned our board of directors against me. When does this end? Alexander leaned forward, his eyes like ice. It ends when every single person who hurt Elena understands exactly what they've lost. When they realize that the Blackwood name they're so proud of means nothing without the integrity she brought to it. And what about the company? Your inheritance? You're throwing away everything we've built. I'm building something better. Alexander's voice softened slightly. Something that would make Elena proud. A legacy based on compassion and genuine value, not just wealth and power. And if she never comes back? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Alexander's face. Then I'll have created something worthy of her anyway. He stood, dropping his napkin on the table. The winter charity ball is in 3 days. I suggest you prepare Mother and Isabel for some significant announcements. As he walked away, leaving his father staring after him, Alexander didn't see the small smile that crossed Robert's face, the smile of a man who, perhaps for the first time, was truly proud of his son. The night of the Children's Hospital fundraiser arrived with a light snowfall that dusted the city in white. Elena stood before the small mirror in her apartment above the bookstore, hardly recognizing herself. Beatrice had insisted on buying her a simple blue dress for the occasion. Nothing flashy or expensive, but elegant in its simplicity. You represent the hospital tonight, Beatrice had said. Those children look up to you. Elena touched the silver necklace at her throat, the only piece of jewelry she had kept from her life with Alexander. He had given it to her on their first anniversary, a delicate pendant in the shape of a sea turtle to remind her of their honeymoon. She had nearly left it behind that rainy night, but at the last moment had slipped it into her pocket, unable to part with this one small token of what they had shared. Ready? Beatrice called from downstairs. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and picked up her small clutch purse. As ready as I'll ever be. The hospital ballroom had been transformed with twinkling lights and elegant decorations. Doctors, nurses, and donors mingled, glasses clinking as waiters circulated with trays of appetizers. Elena slipped in quietly, nodding to familiar faces from her volunteer work. There you are. Diane hurried over, resplendent in a glittering gold dress. The program starts in 20 minutes. You'll speak right after Dr. Wilson's update on the pediatric research program. Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the room nervously. No sign of Alexander or any of the Blackwoods. Perhaps she had been wrong about the anonymous donation. Looking for someone? Beatrice asked gently, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of champagne. No, Elena said quickly, accepting the glass, just nervous about the speech. You'll be wonderful. Just speak from the heart about those children. As Elena sipped her champagne, a tall man in an expensive suit approached them. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought it was Alexander, but As he came closer, she recognized Thomas, Alexander's friend and lawyer. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said with a small bow. "It's good to see you looking well." Elena's hand tightened around her glass. "It's Ms. Rivera now, Thomas. And I'm surprised to see you here." Thomas smiled warmly. "I'm representing certain interested parties tonight." He glanced at Beatrice, who was watching them curiously. "Might I have a moment of your time? In private?" Elena hesitated, then nodded. To Beatrice. "I'll be right back." Thomas led her to a quiet corner near a large window overlooking the snow-covered garden. "He knows you're here," he said without preamble. "He's known for almost 2 weeks." "Alexander?" Elena's heart pounded. "He wanted to come tonight, but he thought it might frighten you away." Thomas pulled an envelope from his inside pocket. "He asked me to give you this, and to tell you that whatever you decide, the donation to the hospital stands with no strings attached." Elena took the envelope with trembling fingers. Is he well?" A strange expression crossed Thomas's face, something between admiration and concern. "He's been busy, very busy. The things he's done since you left." He shook his head. "Just read the letter. Please." Before she could ask more questions, Thomas melted back into the crowd, leaving Elena alone with the envelope burning in her hand. She slipped outside onto a small balcony, the cold air a shock against her warm skin, and opened the letter. "My dearest Elena, I failed you in every way possible. I brought you into a viper's nest and then left you to fend for yourself while I chased business deals around the world. I believed that providing for you materially was enough, never realizing that what you needed most was for me to stand beside you against the cruelty of my family. I know now what my mother and Cassandra planned to do, what they did to drive you away. There are no words to express my rage when I discovered their schemes or my despair when I realized you had fled, believing I would take their side against you. I have spent every day since you left making sure they understand exactly what their actions have cost them. The Blackwood name they were so desperate to protect now brings them nothing but closed doors and withdrawn invitations. But none of that matters if you are not by my side. I've established a trust fund in your name. Access details are enclosed. Whether you choose to return to me or not, you will never have to worry about money again. This isn't an attempt to buy your forgiveness. It's simply the security you deserve after what you've endured. If you wish to see me, I will be at the winter charity ball tomorrow night. If you don't come, I'll understand. I'll respect your decision and never bother you again. I have loved you since the moment you passionately explained tide pools to me at that first charity event, and I will love you until my last breath. Forever yours, Alexander." Elena read the letter twice, tears blurring her vision. Part of her wanted to run to him immediately, while another part held back, wary of being hurt again. A gentle knock on the balcony door startled her. "They're ready for you to speak," Diane said softly. Wiping her eyes quickly, Elena folded the letter and returned inside. As she took her place at the podium, looking out at the sea of expectant faces, she set aside her personal turmoil and focused on the children who had brought light to her darkest days. "When I first came to volunteer at Bayview Children's Hospital," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I thought I was there to give something to the children, my time, my attention, perhaps a brief escape into the world of books. What I didn't expect was how much they would give me in return." For 5 minutes, she spoke from her heart about the courage of children facing impossible odds, about the power of stories to transport us beyond hospital walls, about the community created when voices joined together around a shared tale. By the time she finished, many in the audience were wiping away tears. "Thanks to the incredible generosity of our anonymous donor," she concluded, "these children will soon have a new wing with private reading nooks, a multimedia library, and spaces where families can gather to share stories that will sustain them through difficult times. Because sometimes, when the world seems darkest, the right story can be a light guiding us home." The applause was thunderous, As Elena stepped down from the podium, Diane announced that the anonymous donor had just increased their matching gift, doubling the hospital's fundraising goal for the evening. Later that night, back in her small apartment, Elena sat by the window, watching snowflakes dance in the streetlight below. Alexander's letter lay open beside her, along with the details of the trust fund, a sum so large she could hardly comprehend it. "What are you going to do?" Beatrice asked, setting a cup of tea beside her. "I don't know." Elena touched the turtle pendant at her throat. "I still love him. I never stopped. But that world, his family, those people. From what his friend hinted, it sounds like Alexander has been making some changes in that world." Elena smiled faintly. "He can be determined when he sets his mind to something. The question is, do you trust him enough to give him another chance?" Beatrice patted her hand. "Only you can answer that, my dear." The next evening, the grand ballroom of the Heritage Hotel glittered with the city's elite gathered for the Winter Charity Ball, the most prestigious social event of the season. Victoria Blackwood stood near the entrance, her smile brittle, as she greeted guests with noticeably less warmth than in previous years. Beside her, Isabel looked strained, her usual haughty confidence dimmed. Her husband was conspicuously absent. At precisely 9 o'clock, a ripple of whispers spread through the crowd as Alexander Blackwood entered, alone, impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, his face a mask of polite indifference. Without acknowledging his mother or sister, he moved directly to the center of the room where the orchestra was preparing to play. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" His voice carried effortlessly across the suddenly hushed space. "I have several announcements to make." Victoria took a step forward. "Alexander, this isn't the appropriate time." "On the contrary, Mother, this is exactly the right time and place, surrounded by the people who have witnessed the Blackwood family's influence for generations." Alexander's smile was cold. "First, I am resigning as CEO of Blackwood Tech, effective immediately." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Second, I've established a new foundation focused on environmental conservation and educational opportunities for disadvantaged youth. This foundation will be funded with 75% of my personal fortune." Victoria's face had gone white. "Alexander, you can't possibly—" "Third," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "I would like to address the rumors about my marriage." His voice softened slightly. "Many of you were present when I brought Elena into this world. You witnessed her genuine kindness, her intelligence, her compassion, and some of you—" His gaze swept the room, lingering on certain faces, participated in making her feel unwelcome and unworthy. The crowd was utterly silent now, uncomfortable awareness dawning on many faces. "What you may not know is that my wife was driven away by deliberate cruelty and manipulation. She left believing I would choose family standing over love." For the first time, his composure cracked slightly. "She was wrong. There is nothing, no fortune, no family name, no social position, that I wouldn't sacrifice for her." At the back of the ballroom, unnoticed by the spellbound audience, a side door opened quietly. Elena slipped in, her simple emerald dress a stark contrast to the elaborate gown surrounding her. She moved silently along the wall, drawn by Alexander's voice. "I've spent the past months dismantling the structures that allowed such toxic behavior to flourish," Alexander continued. "Not out of vengeance, but because any world that would reject someone as genuine and good as Elena is fundamentally broken." He took a deep breath, scanning the crowd one more time. "If Elena is listening, if by some miracle she can hear me, I want her to know this. I am ready to walk away from everything, the Blackwood name, the fortune, all of it, to build a new life with her, on her terms, in her world. That won't be necessary." The crowd parted like a wave as Elena's voice rang out clear and strong. Alexander froze, his eyes widening as he saw her standing there, the sea turtle pendant gleaming at her throat. "Elena," he whispered, seemingly forgetting the hundreds of people watching them. She moved toward him slowly, her head held high. "I heard what you said. All of it. I meant every word." His voice was rough with emotion. When she reached him, Elena took his hands in hers. I don't want you to give up your name or your position. Those things are part of who you are. They're nothing compared to you. Elena shook her head gently. What I want is a partner who stands beside me, not a world that kneels at my feet. Can you be that partner, Alexander? Can we build something new together, not your world or my world, but our world? In answer, Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go again. The ballroom erupted in applause, genuine this time, not the polite social approval they were accustomed to giving. As Victoria and Cassandra watched in dismay from the sidelines, as Isabel slipped quietly out a side door, as the society that had once rejected Elena now witnessed her triumph, Alexander whispered in her ear, "Let's go home." Elena smiled up at him, touching his face gently. "I am home." Hand in hand, they walked out of the ballroom and into the snowy night, leaving behind the glittering, shallow world that had nearly destroyed their love. Ahead lay something far more precious than social standing or family legacy, a future built on mutual respect, shared values, and the unshakable knowledge that they had fought for each other when it mattered most. And that, in the end, was the most perfect revenge of all.